live. Hey guys, while everyone hops on in, I'm Tom LoBianco, editor, founder, 24 Site News, joined today by Elise Lavit. She is the author of Cosmopolitics, longtime State Department reporter, expert on foreign affairs, my former colleague at CNN. And I'll tell you, she knows everything about what's happening in the global sweep of things. So we could talk about the micro. We'll talk
I don't
about
know
Virginia
about
in another one.
everything, but yeah, I know it.
You know
I've seen
every
a thing or two.
you Elise knows a few things. Let's
Good to be with you, Tom.
hey hey. So um, if you were a foreign leader, or even if you were a seasoned veteran reporter, would you accept an Oval Office meeting?
I might, but I would have to come prepared, okay? As we saw what happened yesterday with the South African president Ramaphosa, as we saw what happened with
Mm,
Zelensky, I like to say that Oval Office meetings are like kind of the feudal system under President Trump, like when people had to come bearing gifts. So you had to come with like a goat or, a goat's son of gold or three daughters or something like that. Like you really have to come, I would say, with hat in hand
mm,
and gift in hand, ready to kind of praise the president,
mm,
that psychological need for respect. You have to show that you can do something, that you can be of value. And you really just have to kiss the ring. I mean, that's what he's looking for, specifically in public. And anybody that, kind of strays from that or tries to correct them. I mean, look, no president likes that, right? Remember when
right.
Netanyahu lectured President Obama, in
Mm,
the Oval Office? I mean, what president likes that? But even when President Trump kind of says something that, may not be true, probably best to, wait until the meeting in private to then say something because this president is going to turn the tables and not give the other leader the respect
yeah.
that they need unless he feels that he's being appropriately appropriately given the respect. And if you look at what happened yesterday with the South African president, I think
Yeah.
he handled himself pretty well.
Mm,
He tried to ask questions, he tried to correct the record, but not in an acrimonious way. It wasn't until one of the kind of white billionaires popped up and told the president, Mr. President, there's no genocide in South Africa. We can talk a little bit more about that issue, but that it all kind of turned and he was able to make a joke about the jet and say, Mr. President, I wish I had a jet to give you, but it just kind of gives you a flavor of what the president is looking for in these meetings. And I think he handled it, President Ramaphosa handled it pretty
mm,
well. I think um, Prime Minister Modi of India did really well in the Oval
mm.
Office. I think the UK Prime Minister Stammer, the British Prime Minister, did
Yes.
very well. It's
Yeah.
all about showing appropriate respect, showing you could be of value, and bearing gifts.
Can you get a 747 through a Secret Service screen?
I don't know. It might be pretty hard, but with this president, who knows?
It's I keep thinking about the soccer ball with Putin, and
Right.
then
I mean, that
and
was
what's in
ages
those
ago,
gifts?
but it just does go to
Yeah.
show you like these gifts. There's a couple of reasons why you're not supposed to hold on to them. Security is one, appearance is another, bribery is another. I mean, yeah, that gift that's a big gift.
Little things, just a few
Little
things.
trinkets, little
Ethics,
trinkets.
corruption, Um, does this and this is why, we've talked before, we've done a lot together before, but especially now with 3, 4, 5 months of this new administration, why I wanted to have you here because it's so different in appearance than previous presidents, even Trump the first term. Um, are there allegories for this, or are there corollaries for this to either previous presidents, or which foreign leader does this remind you the most of? Because, I mean, frankly, what Trump is doing certainly seems foreign to me.
No, I mean, I mean, I think maybe Muammar Gaddafi would be the only allegory that I
Mm,
could really think of. I mean, no, there's no other president. Look, I'm not saying that presidents don't like for the leader to come in and kiss their butt and say how wonderful you are and how special the relationship is, but this kind of transactional, as I said, it's almost like a feudal system.
right.
I can't, maybe in ancient Egypt, I can't remember so anything like this. I mean, like I said, maybe Muammar Gaddafi with the kind of, splendor and, but I can't really think of anything now.
Will there be any old school smiting by God at some point?
Possibly,
Speaking of Egypt, I don't.
possibly. I don't know. Let
um,
my people go, Ramses.
um, we had this horrendous attack last night here in Washington, outside of the Jewish capital center, I believe. Two staffers within the embassy appear to
Yeah,
have been murdered.
really hard.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that and sort of the context of this, because I mean, if October 7th and the Israel-Hamas war were already not a powder keg, I mean, this comes immediately on top of that. Where do things stand right now, and what is the effect of that?
Well, look, as you said, two members of the Israeli embassy staff were killed. One of them was a young woman, about, I think
Mm.
maybe they were about to be engaged, or one of the young women was about to be engaged. It's really young woman,
Oh,
just horrible. It was at a Jewish center. It was actually an event about trying to send aid to Gaza. So this is just really.
oh, wow.
And a man was out there. It looks like they've arrested a suspect, and he was screaming "Free Palestine, Free Palestine." And I mean, it's just shows that anti-Semitism again is rearing its ugly head. And I can't think of another global issue where, when there's a country that's a rogue regime, or a internationally unpopular regime, that the people of that country, or maybe, I mean, I guess Americans like are vulnerable to terrorist attacks, but that people are, how, what I mean, like, I'm not saying that they should do this, but they're not going after the Israeli embassy, they're going after Jewish people. And
Yeah,
so it's anti-Semitism. There,
yeah,
people conflate and this is a whole nother substack, but people do conflate Israeli policy with the Jews. And it's just horrible. And I mean, it does come on the heels of the Israelis going back into Gaza and trying to reoccupy Gaza and just mow it down. And
right.
also the cutting off of aid, which is very unpopular. And it comes as Israel's really facing a lot of criticism in the international community, and countries like the UK and France now are
Mm,
stepping up their criticism of Israel. They're stepping up policy decisions. The British are deciding not to go ahead with a free trade deal for Israel.
mm,
And there's a lot of criticism online, and now some Israeli officials are saying that what happened yesterday is a result of this international condemnation of Israel. I don't think that's fair.
yeah,
I mean, there is a lot of horrible things online, inciting to violence, things like that. But decisions and comments by world leaders criticizing Israeli policy can't be blamed for something like this.
yeah.
I don't think they can be blamed for the anti-Semitism around the world.
It's and anti-Semitism is has been such. I mean, even, I mean, really, long before October 7th, has been such a political flashpoint. I mean, the Tree of Life shooting years ago, the rise of swastikas on campuses, for years now. I mean, my God, almost a decade, really, as you noted, really concurrent. with the proliferation of social media and bad social media, I might note, not here on Substack, which is one of the good places. That's why
Well,
we're here.
there's a little ridiculous stuff on Subspec, but certainly
Yeah.
not as much.
So it's not it's it's not, let's just put it this way, it's not the richest man in the world throwing up 2 Sieg Heils and then saying that you didn't see that. We'll say that, okay. I, I'm interested though because I feel like it's increased under the second Trump administration. And it's kind of the weaponization of that terminology and the dividing of it, right? Because I mean, in our sense, right, in our parlance, and the world of journalism, there is a reality. There's a defined term, but then in the world of politics, it is selective, right? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Um, do you feel like that this is a very long way to get to an actual question. Um, do you feel like that fuels this, though? Do you feel like that fuels that anger and ultimately hatred, which presumably is, has resulted in this?
I don't think there's a exact correlation. What I will say is that because and also right now you see kind of, people the Trump administration's kind of policy towards Israel is, a little bit inconsistent. One minute they're totally for Israel,
Mm,
next minute they're criticizing them. They support them on Gaza. There's a lot of tension over the Iranian issue. But what I'll say is what the this Trump administration does has kind of heightened, you know, and emboldened and enabled what people are saying online, and like
mm,
anything goes right now. The rhetoric and the hatred
yeah.
and the vitriol that's online right now, I think, that is, and I won't only blame, MAGA or whatever,
Sure.
but I think in this era, like, the online vitriol and the online hatred um is almost like it's okay now. It's we're
Mm,
normalizing it. So
yeah.
I think that's part of the problem.
It's
I
real.
don't
I
want to
mean,
blame, I certainly can't blame MAGA or the Trump administration for anti-Semitism, although it's very interesting. You know, President Trump is
mm,
supportive of Israel. A lot of his supporters are, and a lot are not, because a lot of them are white nationalists anti-Semites. So it's like a mixed bag of pro-Israel people, anti-Semites, and people that are support Israel because not because they support the Jews. Like, you can support Israel and not support the Jews because these
yes.
people are waiting for the rapture. I mean, a
I
lot of them are
mean,
very religious evangelicals or born again that are waiting for the rapture. And so they support Israel's, they support the country because they think they're going there in a new life.
I I mean, this is why we have Mike Huckabee as the ambassador and
Exactly.
evangelical,
In
and for
in previous years, there's a lot of times, not all the time, there's been a Jewish ambassador. I don't think either one of those are, I don't think you should have a born again waiting, that's
mm,
basically, it's a good thing I'm in Israel because the rapture could come at any minute. And I also don't think really that a Jewish person,
yeah,
although we've had very good Jewish ambassadors who I think, but they do kind of approach any country. I don't think a French citizen should be a French, I
yeah,
don't think someone although, the religious and the nationality are different, but I
yeah,
don't think that you can approach that with complete objectivity.
yeah. It's other thoughts on that. I think back to when they moved the embassy to Jerusalem and
I
the
was
look on.
there.
Oh wow, how did okay?
It's interesting. There were these Trump, Zion for Trump signs. They weren't by any Jewish organization. They were by evangelicals.
Yeah, Jews for Jesus, right? That's
It's not this, yes, but yeah.
yeah, but not really, right? Right. That's for another one. That is a whole other discussion and very rampant as as we note here. And for folks who just joined, folks, I'm Tom LoBianco, editor of 24 Site News, joined today by Elise Labott, longtime State Department Foreign Affairs reporter, my former colleague at CNN, and you can find her on Substack over at Cosmopolitics. Elise, what is the latest with Ukraine? I feel like the longer the phone calls go between Trump and Putin, the less we know.
I mean, look, to President Trump's credit, he does want to end this war. And he has, I don't
Hmm.
know that Steve Witkoff is the best person to do that as his like envoy of everything. But he does really want to end this war, and he's, sent his envoy to talk with Putin, to talk with Zelensky. I mean, you could say that he's been a little bit more deferential to Putin. But I think he's given Putin every chance to say, listen, let's get a ceasefire going. The administration, the Europeans, the
Hmm.
Ukrainians wanted a 30-day ceasefire by which negotiations would start. And basically, President Putin gave him the hand and said, I'll negotiate, but I'm not starting the ceasefire until the so and so root causes, right?
Hmm.
Quote unquote root causes of the conflict, and that's basically Ukraine's unconditional surrender, a demilitarized state, more territory than the Russians already have. So he basically
Yeah.
said, piss off. And so he's not, President Putin is not playing ball. He's stringing President Trump along,
Yeah.
and I think that President Trump is starting to realize that. I mean, he kind of has said that. And so whether it's him or after this call, nobody really thinks that there was any progress made. And the question is, Marco Rubio are saying, well, maybe we'll walk away. What does walk away mean? Does walk away
Hmm.
mean you guys, we're peace out, we're going to let you guys just kill each other and we're off? Or is the US going to give up trying to negotiate and just give Ukraine the aids and weapons that it
Oh.
needs? And
Hmm.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I do think that President Trump, as much as he wants a good relationship with Vladimir Putin, I think he's starting to lose patience. He's starting to lose
Hmm.
patience with both sides, but I think, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I do think he realizes that, Zelensky, it's interesting. The realities of governing are much different than,
Yeah.
when you're apart. And I think President Trump came in with this certain opinion of the Ukrainians. And remember, he was saying that the Ukrainians started the war. I think he's
Yeah.
starting to realize that. I think he's starting to, as his predecessor, President Bush, looked into his eyes and saw his soul. I think he's looking at Vladimir Putin and seeing that he has no soul. And I think he's getting frustrated with Putin. Whether that translates into, supporting Ukraine
Hmm.
more heavily, I think we'll have to see.
I thought it was interesting. I was reading this morning in Semaphore, longtime Senate reporter Burgess Everett had a piece. I think Morgan Chalfant as well on some of the security hawks in the Senate, and there are still, believe it or not, still a few of those in the Republican Party. They tend to be camped out over in the Senate, um, starting to talk more about the need for sanctions and seeing this as the time to start pushing sanctions on Russia. So I mean, perhaps an inflection point here in the relationship. It's so much of this is personal, right? I mean, we go back. I mean, at least one impeachment, you could make an argument on the influences of the second one regarding the politics and Biden and whatnot, the 2020 election. But at least one impeachment built around his relationship with Zelensky, and then so much of that animosity. But then, as you note here, you think back to who was the Secretary of State and also apparently the National Security Advisor in perpetuity, is the guy who ran against him in 2016 and beat the heck out of him, making fun of his genitalia in the Republican primaries. And there he is sitting in the room, getting elevated, perhaps even to the point of running for president in 2028. It's very, as I as you note here, I don't. I hesitate to use the word mercurial. I'm trying to think of a better a better adjective for this, but some version of mercurial in Trump's temperament in these things.
Well, I mean, listen, no president likes to be embarrassed. No president likes to be a chump
Mhm,
or, a loser. But President Trump in particular, he has been looking for this respect and this
mm,
adulation. He wants this friendship with Putin. He, adores him, thinks of him as this strong man. But he's not getting any respect in return, and that's very important to him. And maybe that lack of respect that Putin is but again, I have to give President Trump some credit here, that
mm,
even though he said he could do it in 24 hours, and maybe the execution, and maybe the not maybe certainly the
yeah,
execution and the way this has been going about, where they're really just negotiating with the Russians and they're not bringing in the Europeans, and the Ukrainians are kind of getting the short end of the stick on the negotiations. He's trying to end the war, and he's getting no
mm,
respect from Vladimir Putin. And at some point, and I mean, Marco Rubio is more of a Russia hawk, and I'm sure I see some influence there by saying, like, this guy is playing us. And
yeah,
so yeah, he's mercurial, but no president likes to be embarrassed, and it's becoming more and more obvious.
mm,
um you know and another thing about President Trump is he's always like influenced by the last people in the room. And
yes,
I think that everyone says that, but like more and
that's
more,
true.
the
Yeah,
last people in the room seem to be saying President Trump, we're not getting anywhere with Vladimir Putin. So I will be interested to see when they say if
mm,
they're going to walk away. Um, the fighting will continue. Does the US
mm,
continue to aid Ukraine? Right now they are.
yeah,
So, and they have talked about sanctions on Putin. I think how President Trump handles this will be, telling in terms of whether of his diplomatic kind of legacy. I think, like, this is his war now. It's not Biden.
yeah,
Rubio said, was it Rubio who said, I don't remember, I think it was
mm.
Rubio who said, this isn't our war, this is Biden's war, this is Putin's war. It's going to be how the US handles it. It's going to also be Trump's war.
Yeah, almost like the Afghanistan withdrawal, of the last term, right? Ends up
Right.
in
I mean,
Biden's
that was
lap.
Biden.
Yeah,
Okay, Trump made the deal, but
yeah.
how Biden left, is part of his legacy. So how we leave the Ukraine, or how we deal with the Ukraine war, will definitely be ours.
Do this is a broader question, something I've been interested in. That, we saw some of this certainly around the Zelensky meeting, and earlier in this. I mean, it feels like it's been a decade already of this administration. But within the first couple weeks and months of the Trump administration, where you had Europe stepping in to fill the power vacuum, right? And or at least there was a lot of talk of that. Has that come to fruition? All right, there's talk and then there's action. Is Europe stepping in, as has Europe stepped in as the bulwark with Ukraine against Russia? Has that come to happen, or was
Not
that saber
yet.
rattling?
Not
Okay.
yet. I mean, look, the Europeans are talking a lot more and working on their kind of strategic
Mm,
autonomy, or their own basically European defense. That's a ways away. They are continuing to give aid. They are continuing to, be that strong partner for Ukraine. I don't think they've given up on the US yet. So they're basically have said, if we have to, we will. But President Trump made a lot of comments when he first came in that haven't come to light about abandoning Ukraine. So we'll see what happens. But right now, at least this administration is talking to the Europeans,
mm.
and they seem to be, if not in lockstep, moving in the same direction.
So, Trump came back last week from, I believe, was it his first big Middle East trip? I think it was his first, or at least it was a gigantic Middle East trip. Um, are you still there, Elise?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I got you. The video cut out. All right.
I
Well,
don't know what happened here.
we have the disembodied voice of Elise Labott, ladies and gentlemen.
There
There
we
we
go.
go.
Wait,
Okay.
wait.
And now we
There.
have the re-embodied voice of Elise Labott. With some good framing, I might add. That's very good. We think about these things in television, as it were.
Got to do better with the lighting, but yeah.
Right, ring light, and then you got some good natural light back there. Yeah, it's good. Maybe smudge clean off the camera a little bit. Clear up the lens. Um, where is Trump in the middle? I mean, with the Middle East. I mean, what is okay? You're going to spend $400 million, all right, or give a $400 million claim, which I hear may end up costing $1 billion for the U.S. to make sure that it's not, you know, a flying intel breach, every day. Um, what was the purpose of that by Qatar, and where's the broader relationship? Because there's always been jockeying between the Gulf states for access, and who has the upper hand with the U.S.
Look, I think this trip kind of showed what kind of president Trump is, which is a transactional president. And as we
Mm,
talked in the beginning, like gifts, you know, I mean, this is US foreign policy for sale. You can't say anything else.
mm,
It was a gift. It was a gift for Trump. It wasn't a gift for the United States. It was a gift for Trump.
mm,
And, maybe the US president will benefit. I don't even know if it'll be done being outfitted by the time, they'll have to make all these, amendments to it to make it, refit to be have secure and, debug it or whatever. It was a bribe. It was a gift for, President Trump. Um for and that's kind of, this nakedly, deal making trip was, kind of gross. But I will say, for the Saudis and the UAE that made the investments that they did, the Saudis made a lot of investments in, certain sectors, and the
mm,
UAE made a big investment in artificial intelligence.
mm.
Those were to benefit the US, but they were also to benefit those countries.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yes.
like, the UAE is all about artificial intelligence, and they want to be a leader in AI tech, and President Trump is just basically rolling out the red carpet. And the Saudis are all about 2030, their vision for transforming and diversifying the economy by
Mm,
2030, away from oil. And so this is about creating more Saudi jobs and things like that. Like, you can see, yes, like, he came back with these big, it was a very successful, trip in terms of investment. With the UAE and Saudi, it's across the board, but with this Qatar plane thing, that was really gross.
does that is there still that tension between the Saudis and UAE and Qatar? Does that remain? Is that like a permanent or?
It's really just about Qatar, and yeah, it
Mm,
remains, but they're all kind of working together, and I think a lot of that is because they don't know the United States to be this reliable ally. Certainly, when you have Trump, and then you have Biden, and then you have Trump, and you never know. They're trying to kind of get their own region in order. And so, there's not a lot of trust for Qatar. Qatar supports terrorist organizations like
mm,
Hamas.
mm,
Um, they definitely support the Muslim Brotherhood. There's a lot of distrust of Qatar. There's this kind of Iran, Turkey, Qatar axis
mm.
of evil. um,
Yes.
and the UAE and Saudi and some of the other Gulf allies are very wary of that. But it's not as tense as it used to be. There's no blockade anymore. They're
Okay.
trying to have a more unified regional position.
Okay. I mean, does a $400 million plane change anything? I feel like maybe you need to get up to from the M's to the B's to really change
Look,
things, the
I mean,
billions.
President Trump has a thing for Qatar, and Steve Witkoff, who
Mm,
his envoy slash real estate partner, has a lot of business in Qatar. And look, his son Eric Trump and Witkoff's son, like a couple of weeks before this trip, were rolling through the region, setting up their crypto fund that is being funded in the region. It's kind of corruption at its finest.
I'm still astounded by the rank corruption of it all, really. I mean, yeah. It, and then they attack. There was that great piece in Business Insider recently pointing out Trump Jr.'s business dealings and how he's becoming the Hunter Biden of this. Or, I mean, you can make a pretty good
Well, and what
argument the whole
happens
family
is
has
because
exceeded.
President
You know,
Biden wasn't tough enough on Hunter Biden, you can't, like, when you criticize what Trump is doing, they'll be like, well, what about Hunter Biden? Which is true. But two
yeah,
wrongs don't make a right. And, they shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have been so laissez-faire about Hunter Biden. And certainly, like, the first Trump, look, this is no the only difference between this administration and the first Trump administration is now it's just like unabashed and they're not even
yeah,
apologetic. It's unapologetic.
yeah. There's no guardrails. I mean,
No.
it's I used to roll my eyes at the adults in the room phraseology. Not so much anymore. Um, so, Elise, what are you looking forward to now? What's on the horizon? I feel like the only continent we didn't hit is South America and the Latin American region. I mean, we know what's going on there. Uh, Bukele and
Yeah, we're
Seacott.
sending all of our deportees there. So,
What's on the horizon for Trump and U.S. foreign affairs?
well, I think this Ukraine,
Mm,
we'll look to see what happens with the Ukraine. We'll look to see what happens with the Iran deal. It looks like it'll be a lot like the first Iran nuclear deal called the JCPOA under the President Obama in 2015.
Shocked, I say.
Um, I think he wants his own kind of Iran deal. And what does that mean for like the region, right? Like, what does that
Mm,
mean? There's talk that if the deal doesn't go through, that Israel might bomb Iran. President Trump would not be happy about that. He's told the Israelis and Prime Minister Netanyahu in no uncertain terms he doesn't want military action
mm,
against Iran. Look to see what happens there. I think that's going to be, the Middle East is continue. Every president says they want to kind of disengage from the Middle East and turn to
mm.
China, or pivot to Asia. That never happens because the Middle East just won't. You can't quit the Middle East, as they say in Brokeback Mountain. And
Sure.
what's going to happen with the
Mm,
tariffs, and the global economy is obviously on everybody's mind. And can President Trump make a trade deal with China? We just don't know yet.
yeah. Wow. No shortage. Guys, Elise Lavit, Elise, where do we find your work?
Cosmopolitics at Substack, cosmopolitics.news. We're having something later today. If you'd like to join us, I do uh, every Thursday we do this hot takes happy hour with Danny Pletka of What the Hell is Going On. She's a dear friend and just a whip smart writer and chronicler of U.S. politics and foreign affairs. So at 5:30 every Thursday, we have Hot Takes Happy Hour. We talk about the biggest stories of the week. Danny is an amazing bartender, and so a mixtress, I like to call her. So
Awesome.
she's always got a cocktail recipe that she sends out. I'll send that out later, and she'll send it
Oh,
out of
what's
What the
up?
Hell's Going On. So that's always fun. So I hope Tom, I hope you'll join us, and everyone will join us at Cosmopolitics at 5:30.
What's today's drink?
I don't know yet. We'll have to see. We'll have to
Okay.
see.
All right.
Usually it comes out. It should come out soon. But she's had some really great cocktails, and Eric Weisbrod, who works with me, got me a beautiful shaker,
Oh, what's
a
up?
Cosmopolitics shaker, and I
Hell
don't know. I,
yeah.
I think I have it back in the office at CFR today. But anyway, it's always a lot of fun. Danny and I don't agree on a lot of policy issues, but we really, have a reasoned respectful civil debate, and it's really always a great time. So 5:30
That's awesome.
Cosmopolitics, hot takes happy hour.
Awesome. And I'm Tom LoBianco, editor, co-founder of 24 Site News. Stop on back in. So I'll have this up over at 24site.news, 24sight.news. 4 o'clock, I've got Trigby Olson and Reed Galen with part two of Trigby's 7 rules for dealing with autocrats. I'll tell you they're useful, whether it's an autocrat or a wannabe autocrat. These are all very good rules. We'll have part two starting live at 4 o'clock today. So hop on back in a little bit.
And then go
Awesome.
over to Cosmopolitics at 5:30 because you'll need a drink.
Seriously.
Happy hour somewhere.
Awesome. Thanks, Elise.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
See ya.